from the News Channel 5 network. This is Open Line.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Line. Glad you're with us tonight. We have an interesting debate, an interesting topic tonight. Should deadly force be allowed to defend against property crimes? Right now, the law in Tennessee is clear. You can use deadly force only when you think your life or someone else's is in danger. In other words, if someone is threatening your life, you can use a gun and you can stop that threat. There is a bill in the Tennessee legislature. It's going to be brought up this upcoming session that would allow the use of deadly force in property crimes. If someone is trying to steal from you, you could then use deadly force. You could use a gun, you could shoot them. There are some serious concerns about that. That bill is being brought up by State Representative Jay Reedy, and he has filed that bill, and it would do just as I said. The NAACP has serious concerns about that, and that is who we are talking to tonight. Two representatives from the NAACP. We're glad they are with us. They join us via Zoom, as all of our guests do now. We have Gloria Sweetlove. She is president with the NAACP. Gloria Sweetlove, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And Dr. Sekou Franklin, he is the State Criminal Justice Chair with the NAACP. Thank you for being with us also, Dr. Franklin.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, so I'll start with you, Gloria. What is your concern about this? When did you first hear about it, and what is your concern with this proposed bill?
Well, I think we heard about it about the time that Representative Reedy was getting ready to file the bill. Our concern is that it will create some just racially based, we're afraid, killings of more young black men and of almost anybody. When you think about, we live in an age where Amazon, FedEx, UPS, the Postal Service, everybody is delivering packages all the time. The way this bill is written, actually, I could have a package delivered to my house. You could be going to pick it up for me, and somebody, a neighbor, whoever could think that, okay, that you were stealing from me, and you could shoot them. The other thing we're concerned about is a life not worth any more than the few dollars of a package left on a porch or whatever. I think our stand your ground laws and the other laws that we have in place, I think they are plenty. People could be making a food delivery. They could go to a wrong address. We have a lot of things happen when you think about Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, and you think about being in the wrong neighborhood. We are just afraid that this would just add to people this vigilantism that people have just has broken out in our nation.
Okay, now this was brought by State Representative Jay Reedy. He's told a Clarksville publication, Clarksville Now, that he believes questions and concerns will be answered as the bill is refined. He said it's in its early stages. It appears that there was, frankly, concern during some of the protests over the summer that people could police might be in one area and protesters may then be able to steal things when police are otherwise occupied. And again, he is saying it needs to be refined, but what he's talking about now is a bill that would allow the use of deadly force if you are stealing things. And it says here during nighttime hours specifically, allowing property owners to kill persons suspected of theft during nighttime hours. It allows them to protect real or tangible movable property. So, Dr. Franklin, what do you think about this?
Well, I also look at I agree with President Sweetlove, and I think the context is important that the bill emerges in the aftermath of protests or response to protests. And just think about what happened this summer with the killing of Arbery, and in Omaha, Nebraska, there was the killing of another gentleman. And even here in Nashville, we had an incident between an off-duty police officer and a military veteran that led to his death in May. And so the context matters. And from my perspective, in looking at the bill and looking at the context, it really is, it's, to use a fancy term, a face-neutral or race-neutral form of racial vigilantism. That is, that it's on the cover of it. The cover of the bill says it's designed to protect property, but the context of the bill brings it back to the issue of race and its response to the protesters. And I would lift up two other aspects regarding the context. That this is not the only bill that's going around that's emerging in the country. In Florida, the governor is supporting a new deadly force bill that would add on to their stand your ground law. In Ohio, there is another deadly force bill. So all of this is contextual, and in response to the protest, if there's a general fear that property could be taken during protests, then the general trend around the country when these deadly force bills are emerging, at least in the last few months, is that people are thinking about what about the situation in Kenosha? Because in Kenosha, when a young man killed those other individuals in response to during the protest, then the group that arrived to Kenosha actually arrived. That is the group of armed men actually arrived to Kenosha under the idea that they're going to protect property. So in many of these cases, whether you're talking about Oregon, in Kenosha, where you have militias, or whether you're talking about the idea that a neighborhood could perhaps hire a private security force or take matters into their own hands to so-called protect against so-called criminal activities, you're talking about also the privatization of policing, the privatization of security, and putting that security and policing into the hands of individuals who feel that they could have a kind of a new wave of vigilantism. And so from our perspective, that could be very problematic. If I can lift up one more aspect of this, if I can, that all of the data and research, and this is what's very important, all of the data and research shows that stand your ground laws, and this is not stand your ground laws, but this is actually a more extreme version of stand your ground. The stand your ground laws and justifiable, quote unquote, justifiable homicides have a racially disparate impact. The research shows that from 2000 to 2017, that the justifiable homicide rate, what the 69% of those justifiable homicides occurred in stand your ground states. The research shows that in justifiable homicides, particularly in stand your ground states, that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that if whites kill African Americans, they're more likely to be exonerated due to justifiable homicide. So all the research shows that justifiable homicides are racially biased and that they're greater in stand your ground states. And this bill by Jay Reedy is a more extreme version of stand, because it's tied only to not just so-called property theft, but it's also tied to alleged or perceived property theft. So it's very possible that someone could be just identified as stealing property, even though they're not, and deadly force could be used against that person.
How likely do you think it is that this passes? Is this just one of those bills that's designed to get some attention, some coverage, which I guess we're giving it, or do you think there's a real threat that this could become law in Tennessee? And Gloria, I'll ask you that first.
I think it is a real threat.
Well, we may not be able to talk. Wait 1 second, Gloria. I don't know why Zoom just presents all kinds of interesting challenges. All right. Let me ask Dr. Franklin that, and we may come right back to you because your computer is doing all kinds of weird things, and it might be on our end, frankly. Dr. Franklin, how likely is it this will become law?
I think there's a chance that it can become law, because if it's introduced this year, then they'll have 2 years to get it passed through the legislative session. And again, if you think about those stand your ground laws that were introduced, I think the first stand your ground law was passed in 2005 by the state of Florida. And then following that was Alabama. Now 22 states, at least, or half of the states in the country, have stand your ground laws. So I think there's a chance that it will get passed, especially if there's a more coordinated effort behind them, and that's what happened with stand your ground laws. You had some groups, some private interests that coordinated their activities with state legislatures across the country, and so I think that there's a chance that this could be passed. And once it's on the docket, once it's on the table, once it's on the stove cooking, then there's also always a possibility that the food can be finished.
So I'm reading an article here from John Harris is quoted. He's been on this show. He's executive director of Tennessee Firearms Association. He said during these protests with police occupied elsewhere, store owners, for instance, under current law, could not use lethal force to stop looting, and people are tired of it. The question is, does the criminal just laugh at them and keep stealing stuff? So that is not the lawmaker who proposed this, but that is somebody with the Tennessee Firearms Association who, it looks like in this article, supports it. If that is where it's coming from, I guess, you know, if somebody's trying to steal from you, again, there's looting going on. What do you, is there any way this bill could be worked in a way that makes some sense, I guess? And let's try you again, Gloria.
I don't think so, because I think it puts open season on people that simply, you know, simple theft. You know, when you talk about the protesters, I really think that we have enough laws in place to file articles against those persons that might have looted your stores. You know, people get pictures of them and etc. I think this is unneeded legislation that will really make it makes it look worse for police and look worse for us as Americans when we feel like that simple package left on the porch is enough to kill someone for it.
That's taking it to the extreme. And then, I mean, what they're talking about is if somebody is, you know, in your store stealing stuff, should the store owner have a right to defend his property? And is there, I mean, so you understand, Dr. Franklin, there is what you said is certainly how this could be taken. But could this be written in a way so that if there were a bunch of people in stealing stuff at a store, does the store owner have some right to use a gun to defend his property? What do you think, Dr. Franklin?
No, that's not what. Any bill can be written any kind of way, but that's not what the bill does. The person who Mr. Harris spoke, 97% of the protests this past summer, evaluating thousands of them were peaceful. In fact, they were more peaceful than the protests by the Proud Boys, as an example. But the same kind of evaluation and metrics used to address them is different than the same kind of metrics that are used to address the same kind of protesters that we saw this past summer. But no, that's a red herring. That example is a red herring. This bill is written in such a way in which there's a language, loose enough language that yes, it would allow a property owner to use deadly force if the property owner sees someone stealing their items or perceives someone is stealing their items. And as a person who's been followed in a store by private security, as a person who's been assumed as being involved in theft, as a person who's been in a situation that you see in some of the news, that's a very dangerous option. But it also, think about, I've seen situations in which police officers have searched properties because they felt something was going on. And in that situation, those police officers could have easily been perceived as being involved in theft. If you think about construction workers working, you know, all throughout Nashville, working during sunset, and could they be perceived as being involved in that? In the case of Ahmaud Arbery, he did something that I sometimes do. He actually, there was some construction going on in the neighborhood, so he just was curious to see what was going on, and then they tracked him over a period of time, and that's when he was followed. So there's just too many scenarios in which a person can be accused of stealing, but at the end of the day, it is impossible, based upon the research, to remove the outcome of racial bias. That is, however you factor in the causes or the reasons why, the fact of the matter is that African Americans are oftentimes more likely to be killed in these kinds of situations.
Let's take some calls here. Let's go to Terry. Hello, Terry.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. We got both of these people over here, and let's take it away from the stores and go to the homes, where people's automobiles are being stolen by a lot of young teenage juvenile blacks. They commit robberies, they commit crimes. A lot of times when they commit these robberies and crimes, they're carrying guns that they've stolen from other places. And so if I'm living in my home and I look out my window and I see somebody out in my yard hot wiring or trying to steal my car or my property out of my car, I don't want to go out and kill those people, but I think they can possibly get away, or if I say something, shoot me before I get a chance to call the police. You know, this stuff is getting outrageous. We got this stuff going on here in Nashville, and teenage juvenile crime is abundant. And it's more so on the black side than any other. Now, I am not, I love black folks. I love a lot of things about our history. I believe we all should live together and live as one. But we got a nurse that was just killed out here randomly by a teenage black man riding down the road and just wanted to shoot off some shots and kill a woman he didn't even know. And so, you know, cars are getting broke into, people's scared, they're afraid. And a lot of these crimes are being committed by young black juveniles. So I would like to ask both of these people what they think about that, about what they're not doing as parents or leaders in their communities to help this stop. Because this didn't happen. I'm 60 years old. This wasn't happening back in the 70s and the 60s. It wasn't happening.
All right, Terry, thank you for the call. Terry is not alone in some of the things he's verbalizing there, and I want to give each of you, let each of you respond and talk about it. But I know Terry's not alone in some of the things he's saying there. Gloria Sweetlove, what do you think there?
And I know that he's not alone, and we know what the statistics say, what the news says. But we also know that a lot of children wind up in juvenile situations because of not making excuses, but because of poverty, poor home life, and etc. So I think we need to be looking at ways that we can deter them from becoming juvenile offenders. Rather than having our gun ready to shoot. I wonder what happened to a warning shot, blowing a horn, turning your alarm on to scare somebody away. It just really makes us very uncomfortable when we say that we gonna cure juvenile crime. Somebody that shows up on your.
Okay, Dr. Franklin, you respond to what that last caller just said.
Well, again, I empathize with the idea that people are worried about violent crime and living in communities such as that. I've lived in communities like that. So, but the caller kind of reinforces the point I'm making that when it comes to issues of criminal activity, at times, either explicitly or implicitly, the race of the alleged offender automatically comes up, and oftentimes African Americans are automatically perceived guilty on sight, and that's not just when it comes to police issues. It also comes to interactions with private citizens, and so the caller could easily made the same argument about white youth in poor communities too as well. But having said all that, I think the caller raises an important point, but I think the caller needs to take a different direction. One of the issues that's not given enough attention is that the drop in violent crime was often associated with robust or heavy-duty policing. But in the 90s, there was a massive surge of community-led anti-violence organizations and programs. The Children's Defense Fund, for example, in 1993 gathered more than 100 prominent African-American leaders and public health advocates who some of them led an anti-violence initiative. They proposed something called the ounce prevention funding, where you could have government intervention programs or funds pouring into community-led intervention programs. So what I would say to the caller is this: think about all the groups that are in the city of Nashville: Gideon's Army, Dads Against Destruction. If you think about the work of Jeff Carr, if you think about the work of the groups like the NAACP, I can go on and on and on. All these groups are involved in. If you think about the work of Nashville Peacemakers, Moms Over Murder, Moms Against Murder. If you think about all these groups, these are community-led groups, often on the shoestring budget, that when it comes to a police shooting, when it comes to a community shooting, they're there is trying to stop it. So what I would tell the scholar is, why don't we take a page that the Children's Defense Fund proposed more than 20 years ago? Rather than Jay Reedy proposing a bill such as that, Jay Reedy should be proposing a bill that would pour money and resources into community-led anti-violence programs that could perhaps stop some of the things that we're saying.
Okay. All right, we have Reverend Fuzz on the line. I always love when Reverend Fuzz calls in. Reverend Fuzz, thank you.
You hear me?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay. Dr. Franklin kind of hit my point there, that there are answers. Hello, Dr. Sweetlove. There are answers to, like what your last caller just complained about. There are ways to reduce, if you want to say crime in your community, there are good programs out there that I've seen them work down through the years. I've seen a neighborhood where the crime went almost in half. And take on Joe Johnson, I remember a lady saying that we used to have a killing every month. And after they did the Hope 6 development, we only had one killing in 10 years, and it was by a policeman. In Preston Taylor, the crime rate went so low that it no longer qualified for assistance from the U.S. Justice Department because they rebuilt that program over there, that housing unit over there. One of my favorite quotes is, "Poverty is the enemy of the law." And our nation, our city, our police department ought to be responsible for mitigating poverty situations. You know what's going on. 37208 zip code, you've heard it, Ben. It had the highest incarceration rate in the nation. And people wanted to take up for the little kids over there. I didn't want to take up for them because it also has the highest victim rate in the nation. And those are good people who were going to work. And the police knew who they were. But if we don't put the resources there for the police to do their job, if we don't put the resources there for people like Moms Over Murder, like Peacemakers, like other grassroots organizations, they don't have the money. If we don't put the resources there to help them do the job, then we're going to have these high crime rates. And we're just going to keep on talking and having Sekou and Dr. Sweetlove on your program, and next year it's going to be the same thing. We've got to put, let me see, Joe Biden says, tell me about your values, but show me your budget. That's me rambling, Ben.
Ramble anytime, Reverend Fuzz. Thank you for calling in. I don't think that was rambling. That was very good. Thank you. I mean, I get a sense that caller, that first caller, identified the frustration that's out there. But if we give in to that, we're giving up. I mean, if we fight the frustration that's out there with a bill like this, it sounds like we're really giving up. Is that what you think, Dr. Franklin?
Well, I do want to just send a shout out to Reverend Fuzz and send a collective community hug for the heroic work that he's been involved in for the last 30 years. So I want to make sure we lift him up. But yeah, I mean, you do not want, this is, Reedy's bill is not an anti-crime bill. He doesn't say it's an anti-crime bill. He says it's in a way that the caller mentioned. It is a bill designed to allow deadly force for the theft of property or the alleged theft of property, and it gives special consideration to people that are involved in deadly force in quote unquote darkness. That's what the bill does. You do not want, if any of your callers have ever lived in a community that is dictated by high intensity gun violence or gang violence, you do not want an open season in the Wild West where everyone is armed and everyone has the ability to use deadly force. I can guarantee you, having lived in those communities, the amount of homicides that will go up drastically. That's not the way that you have to resolve that particular issue. You have to resolve it through a more comprehensive, multifaceted set of interventions than just Jay Reedy's bill. But Jay Reedy's bill it's a racial vigilante bill. He may not say it explicitly, but it's the context in which his bill emerges. His bill emerges in the context of protests this summer in which armed militias were openly going to cities like Portland, like Washington, D.C., like Kenosha, Wisconsin, and openly saying that they're there to guard and protect, quote unquote, property and to protect the police. And they were going there as a quasi-privatized police force. And that's the context in which his bill emerges. And the second part of the context that we have to consider is that all the research says that even under the best circumstances, when you have these kind of laws that are in place across the country, there's a racially biased outcome. That means that African Americans are going to be disproportionately across the board the targets of justifiable homicide killings when those killings are carried out by whites. I want to make this point. The research shows, in fact, that if blacks kill blacks, justifiable homicide, doesn't apply. That means that the highest justifiable homicide rates occur when whites kill blacks, and then when whites kill whites, and when blacks kill blacks, then the justifiable homicide, the exonerations around justifiable homicide is not there.
Wow. So
even if the caller is correct in so-called high crime communities, predominantly black communities, for example, that may have that kind of stigma, so to speak, and not to say that that's the case, the research shows that justified homicides are not as what you find with whites.
Okay. All right. We are still working. It looks like maybe we got Gloria Sweetlove's Zoom going there, so that's good. All right, we're going to take a break. There's several people on the line, and we are going to get to your calls. Joe, John, Don, others. Hold on. Take a break. Be back right after this.